Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I am Dr. Sadia Amir. I am MBBS MPhil Microbiology, working as Associate Professor in the Abba Medical College. This is my third lecture with third year students, which is about the structure of the bacterial cell. These are the key points under which we were discussing the structure of the bacterial cell. I teach you till the cell wall. Today, I will tell you about the peptidoglycan. Peptidoglycans are also called, we can say that the synonyms for the peptidoglycan are the murine and the mucopeptides. The word peptidoglycan, it is derived from two words, peptide and glycan. Glycan stands for sugar and peptides, they stand for protein or amino acids. Peptidoglycan, they are single covalently linked macromolecules. These macromolecules, they form an interwoven complex. This complex is responsible for the characteristics shape of the cell. They maintain the shape of the cell, especially in those solutions or medias which have the low osmotic pressure. For example, water. They allow the cell to withstand that medias. Peptidoglycan, the structure of peptidoglycan, it is composed of three subunits. Number one is the sugar backbone, number two is the tetrapeptides, and number three are the peptide crosslinks or peptide interbridges. The sugar backbone, it is composed of, I will explain this in this figure. The sugar backbone, it is composed of, this is GMGM, N-acetyl glucosamine, N-acetyl muramic acid. These are the alternating subunits of the sugar backbone, carbohydrate backbone. These are the sugars. N-acetyl glucosamine, N-acetyl muramic acid, N-acetyl glucosamine, N-acetyl muramic acid. This is the carbohydrate backbone. To each of the muramic acid is attached a tetrapeptide, this small A, B, C, D. This is a chain of tetrapeptide. To each muramic acid is attached a tetrapeptide. These in most of the proteins, these tetrapeptides are D amino acids or L amino acids. The composition of these L and D amino acids, they vary from one species or from one bacterium to another bacterium. Okay, so different bacterial peptidoglycans can have the different sugar carbohydrate backbones, the sugar components, or they have the different tetrapeptides. So this A, B, C, and D. This is a peptidoglycan structure of E. coli, and this is the peptidoglycan structure of Staph aureus. They has some differences in which this difference it occurs in the peptide crosslinks. In studying the structure of the peptidoglycan, I told you it composed of three subunits: carbohydrate backbone, tetrapeptide, and third one is the peptide crosslinks. These peptide crosslinks, they vary among different species of different bacteria. As we have already, I told you, the peptidoglycan is present in the cell wall of the prokaryotes or only in the bacteria. So it is not present in the human cells, which are the eukaryotes. This difference is very important for the selection of the antibiotics, antibacterial drugs. We can select those antibiotics which can cause the breakdown of the peptidoglycan. As the peptidoglycan is present only in the bacterial cell, so these antibiotics will be selective or specific only for the bacteria. They will not harm the human cells or the eukaryotic cells. So it is a good target for the antibacterial drugs. These are the peptidoglycan structures of E. coli and Staph aureus. The difference is of the peptide crosslinks. Here G stands for N-acetylglucosamine, M stands for N-acetylmuramic acid. And this tetrapeptide is linked with the other tetrapeptide. In the E. coli, the C is cross-linked directly to the D. D is the terminal D-alanine. Okay, the A stands for L-alanine tetrapeptide. In the tetrapeptide, A stands for L-alanine, B stands for D-glutamic acid, C stands for diaminopyrmalic acid, and D stands for D-alanine. I will repeat it. G stands for N-acetylglucosamine, M stands for N-acetylmuramic acid. Now we come to the tetrapeptide. This A stands for L-alanine, B stands for D-glutamic acid. These are all the amino acids. C stands for diaminopyrmalic acid, or it can be L-lysine, and this D stands for D-alanine. And these are X which are crossed. They show the pentaglycine bridge. In the E. coli structure, in the peptidoglycan of the E. coli, the tetrapeptides are directly cross-linked. This C is directly cross-linked with the D, D-alanine. Terminal D-alanine is always involved in the peptide cross-links. This is a very important amino acid, D-alanine. It is involved in the peptide cross-links. In the E. coli, they are directly cross-linked. C is directly cross-linked with the D. Whereas in the Staph aureus, this C, it is cross-linked with the D-alanine, terminal D-alanine, through the 5 glycines. They form a pentaglycine bridge. This is the difference between the E. coli and Staph aureus. In this next slide, it has shown that the size is bigger, N-acetylglucosamine and N-acetylmuramic acid. It is shown clearly. Tetrapeptides are attached with the N-acetylmuramic acid. Here are the amino acids are shown also clearly. This A, B, C and D. L-alanine, D-glutamic acid, L-lysine. It means this is the structure of the Staph aureus. And this is terminal D-alanine, which is a very important amino acid, and it is a terminal amino acid. It is involved in the peptide cross-links 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 glycine sugars. This is the peptidoglycan structure of the Staph aureus. This is the tetrapeptide cross-linking. Here the same structure is shown, sugar backbone. This is a broader view, sugar backbone. This is tetrapeptide, these are peptide cross-links. This is another tetrapeptide and this is N-acetylmuramic acid. Between these N-acetylglucosamine and N-acetylmuramic acid, there are certain cross-linkages. These covalent cross-linkages, actually these are the glycosyl bonds, which is the site for the action of the lysozymes. I will tell you why it is important. The lysozymes, these are the enzymes which are present only in the eukaryotic cells, or we can say that only in the human cells. They are present in the saliva, mucus and human tears. They provide the natural resistance to the microbial infections because these are not present in the peptidoglycan, or these are not present in the prokaryotic cells. Prokaryotes are bacterial cells, they don't have the lysosomes. They are only and only present in the human cells. So, it provides a natural resistance to the microbial infections. Those cells which are treated with the lysozymes, they are present, if they are placed in a solution which contains lysozyme enzymes. So, lysozyme treated cells, if they are placed in a solution which contains the high osmotic pressure as compared to the osmotic pressure of the interior of the bacterial interior of the cell. I will repeat it again. If lysozyme treated cells, if they are placed in a solution which has the low osmotic pressure as compared to the osmotic pressure of the interior of the cell, the water will enter into the cell and the cell will swell up. If the lysozyme treated cells, they are placed in a solution which contain the same osmotic pressure as the osmotic pressure of the interior of the cell, the cells will form the spherical shape which are called the protoplast. So, this is the peptidoglycan. The next structure is the lipopolysaccharides. As the name shows that this whole name is made up of lipopolysaccharide. Lipo stands for lipid, lipid A, different lipids, and the polysaccharides, they stands for the sugars. So lipopolysaccharides, they are also called the endotoxins. I told you in my second lecture, endotoxins are the integral part of the cell wall of the gram-negative bacteria. So lipopolysaccharide, or we can say that LPS or lipopolysaccharide or endotoxins, the same name. It is present only in the gram-negative cell wall. Because they are the integral part of their cell wall. It is composed of 3 subunits: lipid A or phospholipids, core polysaccharide, and outer polysaccharide. In this diagram, I will explain it. This is the portion which is called the lipid A portion. This lipid A portion has the fatty acids and different cross linkages. This is the core polysaccharide, which is the core polysaccharide have 5 repeating subunits of the sugars. This is the outer polysaccharide. It has 3 to 5 sugars. These 3 to 5 sugars are repeated 25 times, or we can say that they have 25 repeating subunits of 3 to 5 sugars. This outer polysaccharide is also called the somatic or the O antigen. It is exposed towards the exterior of the cell. It is exposed to the exterior environment. So these are somatic or O antigens. They are very important for the identification point of view. In the laboratory identification of any organism who possess the gram-negative cell wall, we can identify that organism through its somatic or O antigens. We will use the anti-sera or the homologous antibodies. If the same antibodies, they will combine with this antigen and we can detect this organism. The third one structure is the teichoic acid. Teichoic acid, these are the fibers which are located in the cell wall of the gram-positive bacteria. Lipopolysaccharides are present in the gram-negative cell wall, whereas the teichoic acids are present in the cell wall of the gram-positive bacteria. Teichoic acid perform the same function as of the LPS. LPS are also called, lipopolysaccharides are also called the endotoxins. The endotoxin, they induce hypotension, fever or shock. They induce the inflammation pathway. The symptoms of the different endotoxins of different gram-negative bacteria, they are same in nature, but they just vary in their severity. I will explain this. If there are 2 gram-negative bacteria, their endotoxins will produce the same symptoms, but their severity can be different. The severity of the symptoms of one bacteria may be more severe, it can be more lethal than the severity of the symptoms of which are caused by the endotoxin of the other bacteria. The same function is performed by the teichoic acid in the gram-positive bacteria. These teichoic acid, they also induce the inflammation, and they induce the same pathways which are induced by the LPS, endotoxins. But the different gram-positive bacteria, teichoic acid, they produce symptoms which are different from, which vary from one bacterium to another bacterium. The symptoms which are produced by the teichoic acid, they vary from one gram-positive bacteria to another gram-positive bacteria. So they are very important for the medical point of view. They mediate the attachment of the bacteria, especially the gram-positive cocci, which is called the staphylococcus, to the mucosal cells. Here there is one term which is called the lipoteichoic acids. Some teichoic acids, actually the teichoic acid, these are the polymers of the glycerol phosphate and the ribitol phosphate. Especially those polymers, especially those teichoic acids which are the polymers of the glycerol phosphate, they penetrate the peptidoglycan layer like this. This is labeled lipoteichoic acid. This brown colored fiber is the teichoic acid. Here this is the lipoteichoic acid. Especially these are the polymers of the glycerol phosphate. They will penetrate the peptidoglycan layer and they are attached to the phospholipids of the cytoplasmic membrane. I will repeat it. The teichoic acids, these are the polymers of glycerol or the ribitol phosphate. Especially those teichoic acids which are the polymers of the glycerol phosphate, they penetrate the peptidoglycan layer and they are attached to the phospholipids of the cytoplasmic membrane. These teichoic acids are called the lipoteichoic acids. Whereas the other teichoic acids, they are just attached to the muramic acid of the peptidoglycan cell wall. Next is the cytoplasmic membrane. The cytoplasmic membrane, it is inside on the inner side of the peptidoglycan cell wall. It is the double-walled membrane which is composed of the phospholipid bilayer. You have studied it very well in your physiology. The functions of the cytoplasmic membrane and the potential which is present, membrane potential, you know it very well. The cytoplasmic membrane of the prokaryotic cells and the eukaryotic cells, they are same. Are they same? No. The cytoplasmic membrane of the eukaryotic cells, they contain the prokaryotic cell membrane is same as the eukaryotic cell membrane except in the sterol. Sterols are present in the cytoplasmic membrane of the eukaryotes and sterols are not present in the cytoplasmic membrane of the prokaryotes. This is the only one difference. Otherwise, the structure is same of the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes. But there is one exception. Only one prokaryote which is named as mycoplasma. Its cytoplasmic membrane, it has sterols in their membranes. What are the functions of the cytoplasmic membrane? They are the site of the energy generation as the ATP, oxidative phosphorylation. They are the sites of the oxidative phosphorylation for the TCA cycle, dicarboxylic acid cycle. They are also the cytoplasmic membrane is also the site for the active transport of the different molecules inside the cells. If different molecules have to be transferred to the interior of the cell, they pass through the cytoplasmic membrane. Because cytoplasmic membrane has different channels or the proteins through which They can move the different substances, different molecules. Number third function is the cytoplasmic membrane is the synthesis of the precursors of the cell wall. They actively synthesize the precursors of the cell wall and synthesize the different enzymes and toxins. Inside the cytoplasmic membrane is the cytoplasm. Cytoplasm it contains two portions. One is the amorphous matrix and the other one is the nucleoid region. In the amorphous matrix, different structures are present like the ribosomes, the granules, the metabolites, plasmids and the transposons. Whereas in the nucleoid region, the genetic material or the DNA is present. So first we study the ribosomes. In the prokaryotes, the ribosomes are of 70S. S stands for Swedberg unit. It is actually shows the sedimentation of that molecule. The bigger molecules, they have the more velocity to the sediment. They have more the sedimentation rate. They differ from the eukaryotic ribosomes in their size and chemistry. As in the eukaryotic ribosomes are of 80S, which is the combination of 60S and 40S. They are combined form is 80S. Whereas the prokaryotic ribosomes are of the 70S. Actually, ribosomes are the basic structure for the synthesis of the proteins. In the eukaryotic cells, double-walled organelles are present like the endoplasmic reticulum, rough endoplasmic reticulum and smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Ribosomes are attached with the rough endoplasmic reticulum and it is the site where the protein is synthesized. This happens in the eukaryotic cells. While in the prokaryotic cells, mitochondria or the endoplasmic reticulum are not present. So ribosomes are the sites where the protein is synthesized. So on the ribosome, in the prokaryotes, the ribosomes are the site where protein is synthesized. So it is important for the medical point of view. It can be the basis for the selective action of the antibiotics that inhibit the bacterial protein synthesis. We studied in that the peptidoglycan differences. Peptidoglycan of the prokaryote is different from the cell wall of the eukaryotes. Here, so this provides a basis for the selective action of the antibiotics. Here, the ribosomes also play the same role. They have the selective action of the antibiotics that inhibit the protein synthesis only and only in the bacteria, because bacteria has different structure. They have the peptidoglycan in their cell wall, whereas the eukaryotes don't have. So it is another site according to which we can select any antibiotic. Granules. These granules, these are the different storage structures which are present in the cytoplasm. They serve as the storage sites of the energy. One of their example is the volutin. Volutin are the reserves of the high energy phosphates as the polymerized metaphosphates. Volutin are present in the cytoplasm. They are present in the form of metachromatic granules. These metachromatic granules are very important for the diagnostic point of view. Some bacteria has these metachromatic granules. Those bacteria, they can be identified by detecting the presence of these granules. When we stain that bacteria, these metachromatic granules, they stain red with the methylene blue dye. I will explain it with an example. If we have a patient sample and the physician is suspecting this sample, the causative agent of this patient's disease is any bacteria. That bacteria has a characteristic feature that it has the metachromatic granules. So if we will stain that sample with the methylene blue, these granules will be stained red. So we can identify that and we can confirm the diagnosis that this bacteria, this microorganism is present in this sample. So this is the diagnostic organism, and then we can select the antibiotics according to it. These metachromatic granules are the characteristic features of the Corynebacterium diphtheria. Corynebacterium diphtheria are the gram-positive rods. These metachromatic granules are the characteristic feature of this Corynebacterium diphtheria, C. diphtheria. C. diphtheria, it causes the disease diphtheria. Diphtheria in which the tonsils are involved and a tough membrane is formed on the tonsils, and it causes the respiratory tract diseases, the symptoms of the respiratory tract infection. So C. diphtheria, it is very important for their metachromatic granules. Plasmids. This is a very important structure which is found in the cytoplasm of the cell. The plasmid. What are the plasmids? These are the extra chromosomal, double-stranded circular DNA. These are extra chromosomal. They may be extra chromosomal or they may be the integral component of the chromosome of the bacteria. Usually they are extra chromosomal. They are double-stranded just like the DNA of the prokaryotes. They replicate independently of the bacterial chromosome. They can replicate independently of the bacterial chromosome. Plasmids are present both in the gram-positive and in the gram-negative bacteria. Different type of plasmids can exist in one cell. There are especially the two main types of plasmids are very important: transmissible plasmids and non-transmissible plasmids. As the name shows, transmissible plasmids are those plasmids which can be transferred from one bacteria to another bacteria through the bacterial chromosome or the bacteriophages or the viruses. So these are called the transmissible plasmids. These plasmids, they are transferred in the process of conjugation. Conjugation is a process in which the DNA is transferred from one bacteria to another bacteria or virus or bacteriophage. So these are called transmissible plasmids. These plasmids have high molecular weight, 40 to 100 millions. So fewer copies, only 1 to 3 copies of these plasmids are present in one bacteria. Per cell, only 1 to 3 copies are present because they have a high molecular weight. These transmissible plasmids, they carry the genes for the formation of sex pilus. This is a form of pilus which is involved in the process of conjugation. We will study this sex pilus and the process of conjugation in the chapter of genetics. Inshallah, then you will understand it very well. So, plasmids carry the genes for the sex pilus and for the process of conjugation. They have the transfer genes. Non-transmissible plasmids, they do not carry the transfer genes. So, they are not transferred from one bacterium to another bacterium. They have the low molecular weight, 20 to 40 or 60 million, and they are present in multiple copies per cell. Okay. Now I will tell you the plasmids, they encoded genes. Plasmids carry the genes for the antibiotic resistance. Day by day, bacteria are becoming resistant to the different antibiotics. This antibiotic resistance is mediated or carried mainly by the plasmids. They carry the genes for the antibiotic resistance, especially the beta-lactamases. The beta-lactamases of the Staph, the E. coli and the Klebsiella, they are usually present. They are usually encoded by the plasmids. Number 2, the plasmid encode the gene for the exotoxins. As I told you, exotoxins are present only in the gram-positive bacteria. So, exotoxin plasmids encode the genes for the exotoxins. The different exotoxins are very important. For example, the exotoxins, the exfoliative toxin, or we can say that the exotoxin of the Staph aureus and the enterotoxins of the E. coli, they are very important. The Bacillus anthrax bacteria, it has anthrax toxin, which is also exotoxin. These are the toxins, and the last one is the tetanus toxin, which is produced by the Corynebacterium, Clostridium tetani. These are all the exotoxins which are carried by the plasmids. Number 3, plasmid encode the genes for the pili. As I told you about the sex pili, which is responsible for the transfer of the plasmids, which is responsible for the process of conjugation. So, plasmid encode the genes for the pili. Those bacteria which have pili, they are very pathogenic. Plasmid encodes the genes for the resistance to the heavy metals. For example, mercury and silver. Mercury is a very essential component of the different antiseptics. They also encode the genes for the resistance to the ultraviolet light. For example, the DNA repair enzymes. Due to the ultraviolet light, DNA damages occurred. There are DNA repair enzymes. These enzymes the genes are carried through the plasmids. So, resistance to the ultraviolet light. Plasmids encode different products. These are the genes. These are 5 encoded genes for these functions. Plasmid encode different products. The most important product is the bacteriocins. Bacteriocins are the proteins which have the toxic effects. Those bacteria which possess the property to produce the bacteriocins are more lethal. For example, there is one bacteria which is called Escherichia coli. It produces the bacteriocins which are called the colicins. There is another bacteria which is called the Pseudomonas. Pseudomonas produce the pyosins which are also the bacteriocins. These bacteriocins actually they cause the degradation of the cytoplasmic membrane. When they cause the degradation of the cytoplasmic membrane, the different molecules can move inside the cell and they can cause the damage. Those bacteria which possess the property to produce these bacteriocins, they have different advantages. The selective advantage is for the competition of food. If in the competition of food, those bacteria which have bacteriocins, they have an extra advantage. So it is the pyosins, its very important function is the pyosins of the Pseudomonas aeruginosa. It is involved in to clean the environmental hazards. This function is important for the medical point of view. They are used to clean. They are lethal for when bacteria. They can kill the other bacteria. So these bacteriocins are used for the medical point of view. They are used to kill the different bacteria which are the causative agent of different diseases, especially those bacteria which are antibiotic resistant bacteria. So these bacteriocins will kill that bacteria. Plasmids encode the products for the nitrogen fixation enzymes. The different tumors in the plants, they are also encode the products for the several antibiotics which are produced by the streptomyces, and they are involved in the formation of the different degradative enzymes. So next is the transposons. The plasmids and transposons are very important structures in the cytoplasm. Transposons, they are the pieces of DNA. As I told you, plasmids are the extra chromosomal DNAs. Whereas the transposons, these are the pieces of DNA. They move rapidly from one site to another site even in a bacterial DNA, or it can move from one bacteria to another bacteria. These are the pieces of DNA which move rapidly from one site to another site within the bacterial DNA or between the DNA of the bacteria, plasmids and bacteriophages. Because they have unusual ability to move rapidly, they are called the jumping genes. Very often it is asked in the Viva exam, what are the jumping genes? What are the plasmid encoded genes? What are plasmid encoded products? What is the importance of the plasmids? So if they will ask any question about the transposons, they will ask through its name jumping genes. What are the jumping genes? Because they have unusual ability to move rapidly from one side to another side. There are two types of transposons. One is the replicative transposition. The other one is the direct transposition. In the replicative transpositions, first the transposons will replicate. They cannot replicate independently. They will replicate as a part of the bacterial DNA. When the bacterial DNA will replicate, the transposons will replicate. So they cannot replicate independently. In the replicative transposition, first they will replicate. Then the new copy, which is they replicate themselves, and the new copy is inserted into another site of the bacterial DNA. Whereas in the direct transposition, first the transposons are excised from the bacterial DNA and then they are inserted into another site. First they will excised without replication. They will not replicate, they are just excised from the site where they are located, and then they are integrated into another site. This is called the direct transposition. There are different functions of the transposons. Transposons encode the genes for the antibiotic resistance especially. They carry the genes for the antibiotic resistance, toxins and different enzymes. The transposons, they can be transferred from, I told you, from one site to another site even through the conjugation process. Because they move rapidly from one site to another site, so they are called conjugative transposons. They cannot replicate independently. This is the structure of the transposon. It has 4 domains. This is the structure. The number 1, the first domain is the IR. This is called the inverted repeats. IR are the inverted repeats. At the end, terminal end of each transposon is a short sequence of the DNA. The different base pairs of the DNA, short sequence of the DNA, they are called the inverted repeats. These inverted repeats are IR. They are responsible for the integration of the transposons into another site. From one site to another site, integration, for the process of integration, these IRs are very important. The second domain is the transposase gene. This portion, this encodes the genes for the enzymes called the transposases. These enzymes, transposase is involved for the excision and the integration process. To excise the transposon from the bacterial site and then integration into another site. These enzymes are very much involved in this process, excision and integration. The third domain is the repressor genes. These genes encode the synthesis of the transposase enzymes, and they encode the different products which are produced by the fourth domain. Actually, we can say that they are the regulator genes which regulate the synthesis of the transposase enzymes, and they regulate the synthesis of the products which are produced by this fourth domain. The fourth domain is an enzyme which is responsible for the antibiotic resistance. drug resistance, antibiotic resistant genes. This is the fourth domain. So this is the structure of a transposons. Here now we discuss, I told you about the cell wall, peptidoglycan, lipotecoic acids, lipopolysaccharides, teichoic acids. These are the structures which are very important for the cell wall. Then I told you about the little bit information about the cytoplasmic membrane. Then I told you about the cytoplasm and ribosomes, granules, plasmids, transposons and nucleate region. Now I told you there are certain structures which are found outside the cell wall. These are four structures which are very much important. Number one is the capsule, number two pili, flagella, glycocalyx. Out of these four structures, capsule is very much important. This is of prime importance. These are the structures which are found outside the cell wall. Capsule, pili, flagella and glycocalyx. We will study it one by one. Capsule. Capsule are the gelatinous layer. It is a very important virulence factor. Those bacteria which are encapsulated, it means those bacteria which have capsule, they are more lethal. They are more pathogenic. Okay, they are more virulent. It is a very important virulent factor. You will study it when you will study the special bacteriology. You will study the different encapsulated bacteria, and if you have this background, your basic knowledge about the capsule, you can write down or you can explain this information in the special bacteriology also, in the chapter of the lab diagnosis also. If so, when you start studying the microbiology, please pay more attention to understand the basic bacteriology, because basic bacteriology will help you to understand the special bacteriology, to memorize the special bacteriology. If in the exam they will ask any bacteria and you have forgotten that bacteria, all the information is skipped from your mind. You don't know what I have to write down. If you have the knowledge of basic bacteriology, if you have little bit just know the few points about that bacteria, if you don't know the details of the, for example, you know that this organism which is asked in the exam, it is encapsulated. Just you know this, you don't know the pathogenesis, detail of the pathogenesis of the encapsulated bacteria. If you have the knowledge of the capsule, you can write down this information. You can write down this knowledge in the pathogenesis of the encapsulated bacteria, any bacteria which is encapsulated. You can write down this information in the lab diagnosis of that causative organism. How? Capsule is a gelatinous layer. It is composed of polysaccharides. There is one exception, which is an anthrax bacillus. It is a gram-positive rod which is responsible for the disease anthracis. Its capsule, it is made up of the D-glutamic acid. D-glutamic acid. So this is one exception. Otherwise, all the bacterial capsule, all the bacteria which have the capsule, their capsule is made up of the polysaccharides. They have the different sugars. This sugar component is of prime importance. It is responsible for the different serotypes of they are responsible for the different serotypes of one bacteria. For example, the Streptococcus pneumoniae is an encapsulated bacteria. It has almost 85 serotypes. These serotypes, they vary in their antigens which are present, they vary in their sugar components which are present in their capsule. So 85 different serotypes are present in for the Streptococcus pneumoniae bacteria. The importance of the capsule, it is a virulence factor. How it can cause the disease, how it is virulent? Because it limits the phagocytosis process. You have studied the phagocytosis. In our blood, there are certain cells. For example, the neutrophils, the macrophages. They are called the phagocytes. Their function is to engulf the foreign substances. Their function is to engulf the bacteria or any foreign substance. So, if a bacteria enters into our body, our phagocytes will come, they will detect it and they will recognize it and they try to engulf it. If this bacteria is encapsulated, it has a capsule, this capsule will limit this phagocytosis process. How? Because there are negative charges on the neutrophils and macrophages, and there are also the negative charges on the capsule, on the polysaccharide portion of the polysaccharide part of the capsule. So negative charges will repel and it will limit the phagocytosis process. So bacteria will evade itself from the host immune system. Phagocytes are part of our immune system. Our immune system will not kill that bacteria. Okay? So this is a very important virulence factor. Number 2, these sugar components which are a part of the polysaccharides, they are used for the identification of the organisms because they behave as an antigen. These polysaccharides are sugar components, they behave as an antigen. We will use antisera which has the homologous antibodies for these antigens. If the antibodies which we'll use in the lab are in the form of antisera, they are homologous with these antigens. Antigen will combine and the capsule will swell up. Capsule will swell up actually through the activation of the complicate cascade. When antigen antibody combine, they will induce the formation of different complement components, and you have studied, I think so, you have studied it in the physiology, biochemistry. Complement cascade, different molecules C3a, C5a, they come and they will cause the rupture of the cell wall and the bacteria will swell up. This swelling phenomena is called the Quellen reaction. We can identify the bacteria through this Quellen reaction. Quellen reaction is very important in the lab diagnosis of the encapsulated bacteria. 4 bacteria are very important. They are encapsulated. Streptococcus pneumoniae, Klebsiella pneumoniae, Haemophilus influenza, and the Streptococcus. Streptococcus pneumoniae, Klebsiella pneumoniae, Haemophilus influenza, they are encapsulated bacteria. They can be detected through this Quellen reaction. Their capsule will swell up. So, this is lab, we can write down in the lab diagnosis. They can even ask for 2 marks, what is Quellen reaction? Enlist the encapsulated bacteria. Okay? These sugar components will behave as an antigens. In the formation of the vaccines, these capsular polysaccharides are used as an antigens in the vaccine formation, in their purified forms. Their pathogenesis will be inhibited and their antigenicity will be maintained. Their antigenicity is retained, only their pathogenesis will be limited. So they will induce the formation of the antibodies which are protective antibodies and they will protect that concerned disease. Number 4, the capsule, they mediate the adherence of the bacteria to the different structures, the different mucosal cells or epithelial cells. So these are the 4 functions you can write down in the pathogenesis of any encapsulated bacteria. So, in this diagram here it is shown the capsule. This 1, 2, 3, 4, blue, purple, these are the bacteria. Okay, and the clear area is the capsule. Here this is the purple is the background area. It is the capsule. Here it is shown Klebsiella pneumoniae. It is seen under the microscope, very beautiful. Against this background, the bacteria, and there is a hollow area, clear area, whitish clear area, which shows this bacteria has capsule. In this slide also shown the capsular staining. This is the bacteria and this is hollow clear area, this is capsule and this is the background. So these are the rods and capsulated bacteria. Rods, maybe Klebsiella pneumoniae, maybe any other bacteria. So we are discussing the structures outside the cell wall, in which the flagella, it is a long whip-like appendages. They move the bacteria towards the nutrients, towards different attractants. This is a process of chemotaxis. When any bacteria or any substance, foreign body, it moves towards the nutrients or different attractants, this is called chemotaxis. You will study this process in detail in the chapter of the inflammation, which will be taught in the general pathology. This flagella, which act as a propeller, it has many subunits of flagellin proteins. It acts as a propeller. The energy which is used for this movement, it is called the proton motive forces, and they are provided in the form of the ATP. This ATP will be generated on the cytoplasmic membrane through the passage of the different new metabolites. Okay, I will summarize it again. In the cytoplasmic membrane, different molecules, they pass across the cytoplasmic membrane and ATP is synthesized. This ATP is used for this proton motive force for the movement of that bacteria. Bacteria may have one flagella or they have more flagella. This one flagella or many flagella. Flagella can be located at one end of the bacteria, or they can be present all over the bacteria, on the entire surface of the bacteria. There is a bacteria which are called the spirochetes. These are spiral-shaped bacteria. I told you the shape of this bacteria in the first chapter, in my first lecture. They are spiral-shaped bacteria. They don't have the flagella. Actually, they have the flagella-like structures, which are called the axial filaments. These axial filaments, they move these spiral-shaped bacteria in such a different form of motion, which is called the undulating motion. They wraps around the spiral-shaped bacteria. So they move like an undulating motion. Flagella, those bacteria which are flagellated, they are motile. Two motile bacteria are very much important. E. coli, Escherichia coli and the Proteus species. Both are gram-negative rods and they are responsible for the urinary tract infections. Actually, this flagella is responsible for this pathogenesis. Flagella act as a propeller. Flagella propel these bacteria to move these bacteria in the urethra and move them and propel them to move upwards from the urethra. So the common cause of the UTIs of these motile bacteria due to the presence of this flagella. Here are some bacteria. They are also motile. They have flagella on their surface, and these flagellin proteins, they are used in the identification of that bacteria. Actually, these proteins will behave as an antigen. We will use antisera and we can detect the presence of these certain bacteria. The Salmonella is example of this bacteria. Its flagellar proteins are used in its identification. Salmonella is the causative agent, Salmonella typhi. Salmonella is the causative agent of the typhoid. Here are the pili. Pili are the hair-like filaments. Flagella are long, whip-like. Pili are small, short in size. They are straighter as compared to the flagella. Flagella may be wavy in form. It is whip-like, like whip. But the pili, they are shorter and straighter. They are hair-like filaments. They are composed of the pyelin proteins. They are mainly present in the gram-negative bacteria. Those bacteria which have pyeli, they are more pathogenic. Those bacteria which have pyeli, they are more pathogenic. Functions. Pyeli mediate the attachment of the bacteria with the human cell receptors. And this attachment process or this adherence process, any structure of the bacteria which will help the bacteria to attach or to adhere with the human cells, human mucosal cells or human epithelial cells, or with the human inert structures like the prosthetic valves, like the catheters, like the prosthetic joints, any inert structures, any structure which help in this attachment will be very important for the virulence of that bacteria. So pyeli also mediate the attachment of the bacteria with the human cells, and this is a very important step for the initiation of infection. In the chapter of the pathogenesis, you will study what factors are involved in the initiation of the infection. Because when bacteria will enter into the human body, first they have to establish themselves. First they have to colonize and establish themselves. And all these structures, they help in the establishment of the bacteria. Pyeli, capsule. Mutants of the, there is a exception, Neisseria gonorrhoeae. Neisseria gonorrhoeae is a gram-negative cocci. The mutants of the Neisseria gonorrhoeae bacteria, they don't have the pyeli. So those mutants which don't have the pyeli, they are non-pathogenic. This will show the importance of the pyeli. One of the pilus is very important. I told you before, the sex pilus. This sex pilus is very important for the process of conjugation, for the transfer of bacteria from one bacterium to another bacterium, and its genes are encoded by the plasmids. Okay, this is very important pilus. The last structure is the glycocalyx. Glycocalyx also mediate the attachment, also help in the establishment of the bacteria in our body. It is a slimy layer. It is also composed of polysaccharide coat. It is secreted by the bacteria. It helps to adhere firmly with the inert structures. Those bacteria which form the glycocalyx, they will help the bacteria to adhere firmly with the inert structures, for example the prosthetic valves and prosthetic joints. So it is present in the form of in the important component of the biofilms. They form a film around the bacteria. The importance of the glycocalyx is shown by these two examples. There is one bacteria which is called the Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Pseudomonas is a gram-negative rod. It is a very virulent bacteria. Pseudomonas aeruginosa is responsible for the respiratory tract infections, especially in those patients which have already, we can say that which have the underlying respiratory diseases, cystic fibrosis, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or they are smokers, or any underlying respiratory disease. In those individuals, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, it causes the respiratory tract infections, and this is due to its property to form the glycocalyx. This glycocalyx is involved in this its predominance in the respiratory tract infections. The other one example is the Staphylococcus epidermidis and Streptococcus viridans. Both are gram-positive bacteria. They are responsible for the formation of the glycocalyx, and the glycocalyx formation will help these bacteria to adhere with the prosthetic heart valves and cause the endocarditis. There is another example which is Streptococcus mutans. Streptococcus mutans is a gram-positive cocci. They also form the glycocalyx, and this glycocalyx will establish these bacteria with the teeth and cause the formation of the plaque, which is a precursor for the dental caries. So these are the examples which show the importance of the glycocalyx. The last one are the bacteria spores. Some bacteria, they produce the spores. Especially there are two genus which are called the spore forming bacteria. They belong to the gram-positive rods. They are spore forming bacteria. The number one genus is the Bacillus, and the number two genus is the Clostridium. These two genus, they cause the spore formation. Those bacteria which have the property to form the spores, they are capable of surviving for years and years, because spores are highly resistant structures for the heat, for dehydration, for the chemicals, for different toxins, for any toxic substances. So the bacteria will survive in the form of the spores. Spores will form in those conditions when the nutrients are depleted, because the different nutrients are needed for the growth of the bacteria, for the metabolic activity of the bacteria. And among these nutrients, carbon and nitrogen are very important. They are very important for the survival of the bacteria. So when these nutrients are depleted, bacteria cannot survive, cannot grow, its metabolic activity is limited. So in these conditions, these harsh conditions, these bacteria will convert themselves into the spore formation. The spores don't have the metabolic activity. They do not divide. They just remain as dormant for years. Whenever the conditions are favorable, nutrients are present, water is present, nutrients are present, these spores will rupture. Actually, they have a tough keratin-like coat around themselves. This keratin coat will help the spores to survive in the harsh environment. This coat will rupture and the spores will germinate and they form one bacteria. Here is one point which is very important. The spore the vegetative form of the bacteria, then spore formation, then again the vegetative form formation. This is not the replication process. It is just the differentiation process for the survival of that bacteria. So these bacteria can survive in the soil for many years. Here in this diagram, it is shown the spore formation. Spores have little bit of cytoplasmic membrane, a little bit portion of the DNA, and all the structures, all the organelles which are present in that cell, and they form a keratin coat around themselves. Important features of the spores and their importance. Because the spores are resistant to the heat, so we cannot kill the spores by boiling process. They are killed at 121 degrees centigrade for 15 minutes. This temperature under pressure for 15 minutes, it is provided in specialized structures which are called the autoclave. Autoclave is an instrument which is used in the microbiology process for the sterilization purpose, to sterilize the medical equipment, to sterilize the surgical equipment. So in these forms, this much temperature is used under pressure for 15 minutes to kill the spores, because they are not killed by boiling process. They are highly resistant to many chemicals, so the common disinfectants, they will not kill the spores. They will just kill the vegetative forms of the bacteria. So to kill the spores, we have to use those disinfectants which are specially designed as a sporicidal only those antiseptics or disinfectants, they will kill the spores. Spores can survive for many years, especially in the soil. So, if a person it has any open wound, and this wound is contaminated with the soil, they can be infected with the spores. Even the bacteria is not present, they can be infected with the spores, because spores can survive in the soil. Its example is tetanus. The Clostridium tetani, it forms spores and it can cause the tetanus. And a gas gangrene, Clostridium perfringens. Do not be afraid with these names. We will study these bacteria one by one in the special bacteriology. But try to memorize these names. Spores exhibit no metabolic activity. So, the antibiotics are ineffective for the spores, because antibiotics will only and only perform their functions when the bacteria are dividing, when they have a metabolic activity. So, when the peptidoglycan is forming, when the protein is synthesized, these metabolic activities, then the antibiotics are effective. So, they are ineffective for the spores. Spores, they form when nutrients are insufficient, but then germinate to form the bacteria when the nutrients become available. So, spores are not often found at the site of the infection. If any physician will send a pus specimen from any patient and will say that I want to see whether spores are present or not, we cannot see the spores, because in the pus sample or in the samples which are taken from the patient which are diseased, here the nutrients are not depleted, nutrients are ample in amount. So, nutrients are not limiting, spores are not formed. So, we cannot identify the spores, we cannot find the spores. Spores are produced by the two genera of the bacteria, Bacillus and Clostridium, both of which are gram-positive rods. So, the infections transmitted by the spores are usually caused by these two species. This is a brief review of your whole topic for the structure of the bacterial cell, and this is the assignment for this chapter. First assignment I give you was all of you people will do these two assignments. One assignment is the draw and label the cell wall of gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria. I mentioned this assignment on the stream on Friday. The next assignment, I will mark their numbers. I will check these assignments and I will mark their numbers. The second assignment is you have to draw this table. This table is a very good table. It will give you a brief review about this whole chapter, structure of the bacterial cell. You will write down this table, and then you will take a picture and post it on the stream. Here there is a last is the MCQ. A medical student is admitted to the emergency department with symptoms of hemorrhagic colitis. A sample of Escherichia coli strain. A sample is taken from this student, and it is diagnosed that it is Escherichia coli, which is the causative organism, which is the etiological agent. It is treated with the EDTA, which is the ethylene diamine tetraestic acid. The first wash is analyzed, and it is found that this bacteria has alkaline phosphatase, DNase, and penicillinase. Now, you have to tell which of the following is the anatomic area of the cell most likely affected by the EDTA. EDTA is the chelating. I will give you a hint. Maybe you don't know, but I think so you know in the physiology what is EDTA. EDTA is a chelating agent which will disrupt the cell wall. Now you can find out the answer. EDTA is a chelating agent which will disrupt the cell wall. The options are chromosome, mesosomal space, periplasmic space, plasma membrane, and slime layer. Now you have to diagnose which of the following is the anatomic area of the cell most likely affected. EDTA ने disrupt कर दिया cell membrane को, so the periplasmic space will be the area which is most affected, which is the most likely affected by the EDTA. It has these enzymes which are mentioned. This is a clue. These underlying parts are the clue. E. coli, why it is underlined? It is a gram-negative bacteria, and gram-negative bacteria has the periplasmic space, which is a site for the action of the beta-lactamases, penicillinases. So these are the hints. Thank you.